Ethan Callahan had folded that letter so many times the creases had gone soft as cloth. He didn't need to read it anymore. He had every word memorized. Emily's handwriting, careful and even, the way she signed her name with a small loop on the Y. He'd stood at that gate since sunup, hat in hand, heart doing something embarrassing in his chest. And when the rider finally appeared at the end of the long road, he smiled. He had no idea he was smiling at a lie. If this story already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button and follow along until the very end, because what happens next will stay with you. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The letter had arrived in February, tucked between a seed catalog and an overdue notice from the grain merchant in Billings. Ethan almost didn't open it. He'd been standing at the stove, still wearing his coat, still smelling like the horses, when he noticed the handwriting. Careful, deliberate, nothing like the hurried scrawl of a business letter.
Dear Mr. Callahan, my name is Emily Whitaker. I am a schoolteacher from Springfield, Missouri. I understand you placed an advertisement in the Frontier Register seeking a wife of good character and steady temperament. I believe I may be that woman, if you would be willing to correspond further. He read it twice. Then he sat down. He hadn't sat down in the middle of the day in 3 years. That was February. By April, they were writing every 2 weeks. By June, every week. She told him about her students, a boy named Thomas who couldn't sit still, a girl named Lucy who drew horses in the margins of her arithmetic pages. He told her about the ranch, about the north pasture where the grass came in thicker than anywhere else, about the way the Yellowstone River sounded at dusk when everything went quiet. By July, they had agreed she would come in August. He didn't tell anyone he was nervous. He wasn't the kind of man who admitted to things like that. He just started fixing things around the property that hadn't bothered him before. A broken rung on the porch step, a window that stuck in its frame, a fence post leaning at an angle that had been leaning that same angle since the spring thaw. Deputy Ira Boone, who came around once a week to water his horse and steal Ethan's coffee, noticed. "You paintin' the barn door?" Ira said one morning, leaning against the fence post with both arms crossed. "It needed painting," Ethan said. "It's been needing painting for 4 years." "Well, now it's getting it," Ira grinned at the ground. "She must be something special, this Missouri school teacher." Ethan didn't answer. He just kept painting. The morning she was supposed to arrive, he was up before the sun. He told himself it was habit. He fed the horses, walked the fence line on the east side of the property, checked the water trough. Normal things. But somewhere between the east fence and the barn, he'd found himself standing still in the middle of the field, looking at the long road that cut through the grass toward the main road into Harlow Creek. She'd be coming from town. The morning stage from Billings stopped in Harlow Creek at 8:30. By 9, he was at the gate. He waited. The summer heat pressed down slow and heavy. His shirt stuck to his shoulders. He pulled his hat low and watched the road shimmer in the distance. A hawk turned lazy circles in the pale sky. The grass moved in a flat, breathless way that told him there wasn't much wind. He kept his hands at his sides. He wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't. The rider appeared around 10. One rider. Alone. Coming at a steady pace, not fast, not slow, the kind of pace that said the horse had been ridden hard earlier and was being treated careful now. A woman in the saddle. That much was clear from a distance. He straightened up. He realized he was gripping the fence post. He let go. She came closer, and he studied her the way a man studies something he's been waiting for. Medium height in the saddle. Dark hair pinned up under a wide-brimmed hat.
a traveling coat that had seen better miles. She sat straight, though, confident. He liked that. Then she got close enough that he could see the revolver on her hip. He told himself it was nothing. Women traveled alone on the frontier. It wasn't unusual to carry a sidearm. He wasn't going to be the kind of man who judged a woman for being careful. She pulled up at the gate and looked at him, and her eyes were dark and steady and completely unreadable. "Mr. Callahan?" she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was low and clear, nothing uncertain about it. "That's me," he said. "You'd be Miss Whitaker?" "Emily Whitaker," she said. "Yes." He opened the gate. She rode through, and he caught the horse's bridle gently out of habit and looked up at her. She swung down from the saddle in one clean motion, and when her boots hit the ground, his eyes went to them without thinking. There was dried blood on the left one, a dark brownish stain along the outside edge. Not fresh, but not old either. A day, maybe two. He looked back up at her face. She was already watching him. Neither of them said anything for a beat. "Long ride?" he said finally. "Long enough," she said. He took the horse's reins and led it toward the trough. She walked beside him, and he noticed she moved like someone who was constantly aware of open space, checking angles, watching distances. Not the way a schoolteacher from Missouri walked, more like the way soldiers walked. Men who'd been in situations where a wrong step cost them something they couldn't get back. He told himself he was imagining things. He was nervous, and nervous men invented problems. "You hungry?" he said. "I've got coffee on, and I made biscuits this morning. They're not much, but—" "I'm fine," she said. "Thank you." "You sure? It's a long haul from Billings." She glanced at him. Something moved behind her eyes, fast, and then it was gone. "I said, I'm fine, Mr. Callahan." "Ethan," he said. She didn't repeat it. They stood by the trough while the horse drank, and the silence stretched between them in a way that didn't feel comfortable, the way the silence between strangers sometimes settles into something natural. This silence was different. It was held. She was holding it. "You look like you've been riding since yesterday," he said carefully. "I stopped for a few hours." "Where'd you come from?" "Stage drops in Harlow Creek, but you came from the East Road." She turned and looked at him directly. Her expression didn't shift, but something in her jaw went tight. "I needed to make a stop before I came here." "What kind of stop?" "The personal kind." He nodded once. "All right." He walked the horse to the hitching post outside the barn and tied her off. When he turned around, the woman who called herself Emily Whitaker was standing in the middle of the yard with her thumbs hooked in her belt, looking out at the north pasture. She was scanning it, not admiring it, scanning it. "You expecting someone?" Ethan said. She turned. "What?" "You're watching that road like you're expecting someone to come down it." Her chin came up slightly. "I'm just looking at your land." "You're watching the road," he said again, quieter, not accusing, just stating. She held his gaze for 2 seconds, 3. Then she said, "It's a habit. I apologize if it seems strange." "It seems careful," he said. "There's a difference." Something changed in her face then. Something small, almost invisible, like a door had cracked open a 1/4 inch. But she didn't say anything, and after a moment, he gestured toward the house. "Come inside. It's hotter than it ought to be for August." They sat at the table inside, and he poured coffee he didn't want for himself, and offered her a cup she accepted, but didn't drink. He watched her take stock of the room. Exits, windows, sight lines. She did it fast, the way a person does when they've been doing it so long, it's automatic. "You want to tell me what's wrong?" he said. "Nothing's wrong." She said it flat, like a plank dropped on a floor. "All right," he said. "Then you want to tell me why you haven't touched that coffee? And you've looked at that window 4 times since you sat down?" She looked at him then. Really looked at him. He had the feeling she was deciding something. "You're more observant than I expected," she said. "Ranching is observant work," he said. "Animals, weather, land. You stop paying attention, something dies." A pause. She set both hands flat on the table. Her fingers were long, the nails cut short. The right hand had a callus along the inside of the index finger that Ethan recognized without meaning to. Trigger callus. The kind that came from years of regular shooting practice, not occasional self-defense. He looked up. She was watching his eyes track down to her hand and back up. "I owe you the truth," she said quietly. "I'd appreciate it." She was quiet for a moment that felt very long. "My name isn't Emily Whitaker." The words sat between them like stones dropped in still water. Ethan didn't move. He kept his hands around his coffee cup and his expression even. "All right," he said. His voice came out calm, which surprised him, because something in his chest had just gone cold and tight. "Emily Whitaker is real," the woman said. She was real. She was a school teacher from Springfield. "She answered your advertisement. She was going to come here." "Was," Ethan said. "Was." Her voice didn't waver. "She was murdered 3 days ago, on the road between Springfield and Billings." The word landed like a fist. Ethan put his coffee cup down slowly. He needed something to do with his hands. He looked at the table, then back up at her. "Who are you?" "My name is Clara Mercer. Some people call me Raven." She said it without apology or drama, just like a fact she was tired of carrying. "I'm the one who found Emily after it happened, and I'm the one those writers were looking for when they killed her. They killed her instead of you. They killed her because she was traveling the same road I was supposed to be on, and they weren't careful enough." Her jaw went tight. "She died because of me. I know that." Ethan stood up from the table. He didn't know he was going to until he was already doing it. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her, looking out at the yard, at the road, at the empty, shimmering distance. Emily Whitaker, who liked a boy named Thomas who couldn't sit still, and a girl named Lucy who drew horses, who signed her name with a small loop on the Y. He'd asked himself 100 times over those months what she looked like, what she sounded like, whether she'd laugh at his jokes, or whether she was the quiet kind of person who smiled small. He pressed one hand against the window frame, breathed. Behind him, Clara Mercer didn't speak. She gave him the silence. He was grateful for it in a strange, painful way. "How long ago?" he said finally. His voice was rough at the edges. 3 days. "Where is she?" He stopped. "Where was she laid?" "A churchyard outside of Miles City. The pastor there was a good man. He saw to it." Ethan nodded. He didn't turn around yet. "These riders, they're the ones who came after her, thinking she was you." "Yes, and they're still out there." "Yes." He turned around. Clara Mercer was still sitting at the table with her hands flat on the surface, watching him with those steady, dark eyes. She hadn't moved. She sat like a woman who was used to waiting to see which way a situation was going to break. "Why'd you come here?" he said. "You could have gone anywhere." "Because the men who killed Emily know I was looking for a mail-order situation to disappear into. They'll be looking for a woman who recently arrived at a ranch in this territory. If I kept running, they'd find me in open country. This was the nearest cover." She paused. "I won't pretend it wasn't calculated." "I appreciate that." "I also want to say—" She stopped, looked down at the table for a moment, and when she looked back up, There was something different in her face. Not soft, exactly, but human in a way it hadn't been before.
I'm sorry. For Emily. And I'm sorry for coming here and bringing this to your door.
You didn't deserve either one. He studied her for a long moment. What are they after you for? These riders?
Evidence, she said. I have documents, names, ledgers, transfer records. Proof of a cattle operation that's been running stolen livestock across 3 territories, blaming the thefts on native tribes to justify military contracts. 12 ranchers, 2 government officials, a syndicate that's been running for 4 years and has killed at least 6 people I know of to keep it quiet.
Ethan leaned back against the wall behind him and crossed his arms. And you're, what, a lawman? Pinkerton?
Neither, she met his eyes. I used to ride with one of the outfits connected to this syndicate, before I understood what it was. When I did understand, I started collecting what I needed to burn it down.
So you're an outlaw who decided to stop being one?
I prefer to say I'm a witness with a complicated background, she said dryly.
He almost laughed. It surprised him. Not the laugh, but the fact that anything in this conversation could have produced the impulse. How close are they? He said. Close enough that you looked out that window twice while I was talking. He had. He hadn't realized she'd noticed. He moved to the window again and looked out at the north pasture. The road shimmered. The hawk was gone. The grass moved in that still, breathless way. And then he saw them. 3 riders, coming from the east, not riding hard, riding careful, spread out in a loose line, the way riders spread out when they were searching rather than traveling. Their heads were moving, scanning the land. Company, he said. Clara was on her feet and beside him in 2 steps. She looked over his shoulder and went completely still.
That's Dolan, she said quietly. The one in the middle. He's the one who killed Emily.
Ethan looked at the man. Average height in the saddle, dark vest, hat pulled low. He was too far away to read his face, but there was something deliberate in the way he moved. Slow, methodical. A man who was very good at finding people.
How many more might there be? Ethan said.
Dolan usually runs in a group of 5. I'm looking at 3. She paused. The other 2 are flanking. They'll be coming around the south fence.
You sure?
I've been hunted by these men for 2 months, she said. I'm sure. Ethan's rifle was on the rack above the fireplace. His pistol was in the bedroom. He had a shotgun in the barn. He looked at Clara's revolver on her hip.
You any good with that?
He said. She looked at him sideways.
Ethan,
she said. It was the first time she'd used his name.
I'm the best shot in 3 counties. The problem isn't firepower. Then what's the problem? There are 5 of them, she said. And they don't mind dying for this.
The riders were close enough now that Ethan could see the shape of them clearly. The one called Dolan had his rifle across his saddle. Not drawn, but ready. The casual readiness of someone who didn't expect to need to hurry. Ethan walked to the fireplace and took his rifle off the rack. He checked the load, worked the lever once with a quiet, practiced click, and stood beside the door.
You don't have to do this, Clara said.
She said it plainly, without sentiment.
This isn't your fight.
You're on my property, he said.
That's not a good enough reason to die.
I didn't say anything about dying, he said, and he opened the door and stepped onto the porch. Dolan's horse stopped about 40 yards out. The 2 flanking riders had pulled up along the fence line. None of them made a move. Dolan looked at Ethan with the patient, incurious expression of a man who considered what he was doing a job rather than anything personal. Afternoon, Dolan said. Afternoon, Ethan said. We're looking for a woman. Dark hair, rides a gray horse. She may have come through here in the last few hours. Can't say I've seen anyone matching that. Dolan looked at the gray horse tied at the hitching post outside the barn. Ethan didn't move. That's a gray horse, Dolan said. It is. Woman ride that horse in here about an hour ago? My horse is gray, Ethan said evenly. That's my horse. Dolan tilted his head slightly. His expression didn't change. Mind if we come in and take a look around your property? I do mind, Ethan said. You don't have any authority to search my land. We're not lawmen, Dolan said. We're just looking for someone. Then you've got even less reason to search my property. Ethan kept his voice flat and reasonable, the way a man speaks when he's already made up his mind and doesn't need to perform about it. I'd ask you to move along. Dolan looked at him for a long moment. The two flanking riders were still at the fence. Nobody moved. You're making a mistake, Dolan said quietly. I make them sometimes, Ethan said, still asking you to move along. Something shifted behind Dolan's eyes. He glanced at the house, then back at Ethan. His hand was resting on his thigh, very close to the rifle across his saddle. She's worth more trouble than a man in your position wants, Dolan said. Whatever she's told you, whatever she's offered, it isn't worth your life. I appreciate the advice, Ethan said. The door behind him opened, and Clara stepped out onto the porch with her revolver already drawn, held easy at her side, not pointed yet. Dolan, she said. The name came out the way someone might say the name of a thing they had been expecting for a long time and were not afraid of. Dolan's expression changed, just slightly, something between recognition and cold satisfaction. Raven, he said. You killed Emily Whitaker, she said. An innocent woman. A school teacher who never hurt anyone. You killed her because you were lazy and didn't bother to check whether you had the right woman before you pulled the trigger. She was on your road, he said. That made her a liability. It made her a person, Clara said. Her voice didn't shake, not even close. And I want you to know that every piece of paper I have with your name on it, and your boss's name, and the names of every man in this operation, those papers are already in the hands of someone who knows exactly what to do with them if I don't come back. So you can ride back to Victor Granger and tell him this. I'm not running anymore. And if anyone else gets hurt because of this, I will make sure every name in those ledgers is standing trial before snow falls. Silence. The grass moved. The horse at the hitching post shifted its weight. Dolan looked at Clara, then at Ethan, then back at Clara. He smiled, thin and humorless. You think a piece of paper is going to stop what's already in motion? I think a federal warrant stops most things, she said. And I think you'd rather not find out if I'm bluffing. Dolan turned his horse without a word. He didn't hurry. He rode back toward the east road at the same careful pace he'd arrived, and the two flanking riders fell in behind him. Ethan watched them until they were small in the distance. Clara stood beside him, her revolver still in her hand. She didn't relax. Her eyes tracked the riders until they disappeared around the bend in the road. They'll come back tonight, she said. I know, Ethan said. You should send me away. I'll take the north trail and draw them off your land and— Where would you go? He said. She was quiet. Nearest federal marshal is in Billings, he said. That's a 2-day ride, alone in open country, with 3 men on your tail who already killed someone to find you. He looked at her. That's not a good plan. It's my problem, she said. It stopped being only your problem, he said, the minute Emily Whitaker died on your road. He said it without cruelty, just factual. Her name got used to bring you to my gate. That puts it on my land, whether either of us wanted it. Clara looked at him. There was something in her face he hadn't seen there before. Not softness exactly, and not gratitude, which she probably would have found insulting. Something more like a person who had been operating alone for a very long time and had just encountered something unexpected and was not yet sure what to do with it. "You don't know me," she said. "No," he agreed. "I've done things that would make you think differently about standing on this porch beside me." "Maybe," he said. "You can tell me about them later." He turned and went back inside. After a moment, he heard her follow. Inside, he set his rifle against the wall and looked at the window. The road was empty. The light had shifted toward afternoon, and the heat was still pressing hard against the glass. "I need you to tell me everything," he said. "Victor Granger, the syndicate, the documents, everything. If we're going to be ready when they come back, I need to understand what we're in the middle of." Clara sat down at the table again. She reached into the inside of her coat and drew out a folded leather packet, worn soft at the edges from being carried close. She set it on the table between them. "Everything's in here," she said. "Names, dates, transaction records, testimony from 3 witnesses, 2 of whom are already dead." She looked at him. "This is what Emily Whitaker died for. I need you to understand that. It wasn't nothing. It's not a small thing." Ethan sat down across from her and looked at the leather packet. He thought about Emily Whitaker. Careful handwriting, a small loop on the Y. A boy named Thomas. A girl named Lucy who drew horses. He put his hand on the packet. "Not opening it yet, just acknowledging it. Start from the beginning," he said. "Tell me everything." Clara Mercer looked at him across the worn kitchen table in the afternoon heat of a Montana summer. And for the first time in 2 months, she did. Clara didn't start with Victor Granger. She started with a man named Pete Holloway, and the way she said his name, quiet, almost careful, told Ethan that whatever came next had cost her something she hadn't gotten back. "Pete was the foreman of the outfit I rode with," she said. 3 years ago. We were moving cattle up through the Powder River Basin, and I didn't ask where the cattle came from because nobody asked. That wasn't how things worked. You did your job, you got paid, you moved on." She looked at her hands on the table. "Then one night, Pete came back to camp missing 2 fingers and wouldn't say how. A week later, he was dead. They said it was a fall from his horse." She paused. "Pete Holloway had been riding horses since he was 6 years old. He didn't fall." Ethan said nothing. He let her find the thread. "That's when I started paying attention," she said, "to the brands on the cattle, to the routes we were taking, to the names in the conversations I wasn't supposed to be hearing." She tapped the leather packet on the table. "It took me 14 months to put this together. Every time I got close enough to somebody who knew something, I wrote it down. Dates, numbers, names." She looked up at him. "Victor Granger's name is in here 31 times. "Granger," Ethan said. "The cattle baron out of Miles City." "You know him?" "I know of him. Man owns about 1/3 of the grazing rights in this county. Donates to the church. Has dinner with the territorial governor twice a year." Ethan looked at the packet. "That Granger." "That Granger," she said. He let that settle. Then, "You said they're blaming the thefts on native tribes." "The Crow, mostly. Granger's men steal cattle from small ranchers, men like you, and move them across the territory. When the ranchers report the losses, there's always a witness who saw Crow riders in the area. False witnesses. Paid." Her jaw tightened. "The military responds. Raids, conflict, people die. And in the middle of all that chaos, the army needs food contracts. Granger supplies the beef." She let that sit for a moment. "He's manufacturing war to feed it." Ethan was quiet for a long beat. His hand was still resting on the leather packet. "How close are you to getting this to a federal marshal?" he said. I was 3 days from Billings when they found me. She said it flat. I'd been careful. Didn't take the same road twice. Changed my name twice. Changed horses once. I don't know how they tracked me. I still don't know. Something moved across her face. Not fear, but the particular exhaustion of someone who had been careful for a very long time, and had still been found.
When I came across Emily on the road, it was already done. I couldn't... She stopped. She pressed her lips together. She had your last letter in her coat pocket. I read it. Something in Ethan's chest went tight. She wrote you back, Clara said. She never got to send it. I have it. She reached into her coat again and pulled out a single folded sheet, thinner than the packet, softer, handled with obvious care, and set it on the table beside the leather documents. Ethan looked at it. He didn't touch it. I thought about leaving it, Clara said, but it felt wrong. Like she deserved to have her words delivered, even... She stopped again. Thank you, Ethan said. His voice came out rougher than he meant. He still didn't touch the letter. He couldn't. Not yet. He folded his hands on the table and looked at the window and breathed for a moment. That was when he heard the horse. Not from the road. From the south fence. He was on his feet before he'd made a decision about it. Clara was up just as fast, her hand already on her revolver. Neither of them spoke. Ethan moved to the side of the window, not in front of it, and looked out at an angle. One rider, coming from the south side of the property, moving slow. And the rider had his hands raised. You know him? Clara said, beside him. No. He's not one of Dolan's men. Dolan's riders don't announce themselves. She studied the figure. Hands are up. He's alone. Ethan went to the door. Stay inside until I call you. Ethan! If it goes wrong, you ride north. Don't stop. He didn't wait for her response. He stepped out onto the porch with his rifle and watched the rider come in. The man was older, somewhere in his 50s, weathered and wide through the shoulders. He wore a badge on his coat. When he got close enough, Ethan could read it. Deputy U.S. Marshal, District of Montana. Samuel Holt, the man called out. Federal Marshal. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm looking for a woman named Clara Mercer, also known as Raven. I have reason to believe she came through this property. Ethan kept the rifle level. You got paper on her? Protective detail, Holt said. Not a warrant. He reached slowly into his coat and pulled out a folded document. I've been tracking her movements for 6 weeks. I'm the one she was supposed to bring those documents to. Behind Ethan, the door opened. Holt, Clara said. The marshal looked at her over Ethan's shoulder. Something in his face went loose with relief for just a second before it locked back into professional neutral. Miss Mercer, you're alive. I am, she said. Emily Whitaker isn't. The relief in Holt's face curdled into something harder. I know. I rode through Miles City 2 days ago. The pastor told me what happened. He looked at Ethan. You can lower the rifle, son. I'm not your problem. Ethan lowered it, slowly. You got here fast for someone who didn't know where she was? I've been following the same men who were following her, Holt said. When Dolan's crew turned east toward this property, I knew. He climbed down from his horse. Where are they now? Rode off about 2 hours ago, Ethan said. East Road. 3 men, Dolan and 2 others. 5, Holt said. There are 5 total. The other 2 went around. They're scouting your perimeter right now. Clara came forward off the porch. You're certain? I watched them split up about 4 miles out. Holt tied his horse at the post beside Clara's gray. Dolan's playing patient. He'll wait until dark and come in from 2 directions. He's done it before.
He looked at Clara. "I need those documents."
"I have them," she said. "I need to get them out of this territory tonight." "Then you need to get me to Billings," she said. "I've got 2 more men coming in from the north. They were a day behind me."
"If they're on schedule, they'll be at your north fence by nightfall." He looked at Ethan. "In the meantime, we have a problem." "Dolan," Ethan said. "Dolan knows this property now. He knows where she is. Even if we get Miss Mercer out, he'll come back to burn the evidence trail and eliminate witnesses." He looked at Ethan directly. "That includes you." The word landed without drama. Ethan heard it the way a man hears a thing he already suspected. "Wonderful," he said dryly. Clara turned to look at him. Her expression was stripped of its usual control. Not afraid, but something close to it. Something that looked like it cost her to feel.
"I told you,"
she said quietly.
"I told you this wasn't your fight."
"You also told me you were the best shot in 3 counties," he said. "I'm starting to think that's going to matter more than whose fight it is." Holt looked between them with the expression of a man who understood the situation perfectly and had no time for it. "We need to move. Miss Mercer, I need you inside going over those documents with me. If there are copies, or if there's anything that needs to go separately from the main packet, I need to know now." He looked at Ethan. "Mr. Callahan, do you know this property well enough to know where someone coming in from the south would have to cross?" "I've worked this land for 7 years," Ethan said. "Then I need you to think like someone trying to come in quiet and tell me where the soft spots are." They went inside. For the next hour, the kitchen table held the weight of things that would have seemed impossible to Ethan 12 hours ago. A federal marshal. A leather packet full of documents naming powerful men in crimes that touched 3 territories. A dead woman's unsent letter folded beside a coffee cup. And a woman named Clara Mercer, who had been outrunning her own past for longer than Ethan had been waiting for a future. Holt went through the documents with the focused efficiency of a man who had been building this case for months. He turned pages without reacting, except once, when he came to a particular page and went very still and said, "This is Alderman Crawford's signature." Not a question. "Yes," Clara said. "Crawford's the territorial governor's financial liaison," Holt said slowly. "I know what he is," she said. Holt sat back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. "This is bigger than my office can handle alone." "I know that too," she said. "That's why I needed to get it to Billings. You have a direct telegraph line to Washington." "If this gets to Washington, it won't just be Granger on trial," Holt said. "This will go up 6 levels." "Good," Clara said. Ethan watched her face when she said it. There was nothing vengeful in it, just resolved. The way a person looks when they've been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and have finally decided where to put it down. Holt looked at Ethan. "Mr. Callahan, I want to ask you something directly." "Go ahead." "You've got no stake in this beyond the fact that this woman came to your gate today. Whatever happens tonight, you don't owe her anything, and you don't owe the law anything. If you want to ride to town and stay at the boarding house until this is over, I won't hold it against you." Ethan thought about that for exactly 3 seconds. "This is my land," he said. "I don't leave my land." Holt nodded once, like that was the answer he'd expected, and it settled something. "Then here's what we're going to do," he said. They were still planning when Clara went quiet mid-sentence. Ethan saw it, the way she stopped talking and turned her head slightly, listening. Holt saw it too. Both men went still. "Back fence," she said softly. Ethan heard it then. The faint, too careful sound of a horse being walked slow. Not at the road, behind the barn. Holt's hand went to his holster. "They came early," he said, barely above a breath. "Dolan doesn't wait when he thinks he has an angle," Clara said. Ethan was already moving toward his rifle on the wall. "How many?"
One, from that sound, she said. But one doesn't come alone.
Holt stood. I'll take the back of the barn. Callahan, the east side. Miss Mercer, I need you to—
I'm not staying inside, she said.
Clara.
I'm not staying inside, Marshal.
Her voice was flat stone.
These men are here because of me, and I'm the best shot in this yard. Tell me where you want me.
Holt looked at her for 2 seconds. West side of the barn, high angle. If it goes loud, you cover the road and don't let anyone reach those horses. She was already moving. Ethan went out the east side of the house and came around the corner of the barn in the long shadow of the late afternoon. And what he found wasn't the scout he'd expected. It was a boy, 17, maybe 18, holding a horse by the bridle and looking at Ethan with wide, terrified eyes. "Don't shoot," the boy said, voice cracking, hands immediately going up, letting go of the reins. "Please, please, mister, I came from town. My name is Ben Greer. I work the stables in Harlow Creek. I came to warn you." Ethan kept his rifle up. "Talk fast." "The men, Dolan and his crew, they rode into town 2 hours ago." The boy was breathing hard. "They talked to the sheriff, told him there was a wanted criminal at your ranch. The sheriff said he wasn't going to send anyone out here tonight, but Dolan paid him. I heard it. I heard money change hands. And then I heard Dolan say they were coming back after dark with all 5 of them, and they weren't going to take any prisoners." Ethan stared at him. "I know your ranch because I helped your delivery boy in the spring," the kid said desperately. "I came the back way because I didn't want Dolan's men to see me. I'm not with them. I swear on my mother I'm not with them." Ethan lowered the rifle. Clara appeared around the corner of the barn so silently that the boy flinched and nearly fell backward. She looked at him, and then at Ethan. "He's telling the truth," she said quietly. "I can see it." "The sheriff's bought," Ethan said to her. She didn't look surprised. "Granger owns most of this county. I told you." She looked at the boy. "Did you hear what time they're planning to come?" "After dark," he said. "That's all I heard. After dark." Clara nodded. She looked at Ethan. "The sheriff being bought means we can't send for help from town. Whatever happens tonight happens with what we have." "Holt's men from the north," Ethan said. "If they're on schedule." She said it carefully, and he heard what she wasn't saying. That in this kind of work, nothing ran on schedule. Ethan looked at the boy. "You rode out here alone to warn a stranger." "Yes, sir." "That took guts," Ethan said. "You need to get back to town and stay indoors tonight. Don't tell anyone you came here." "Yes, sir." The boy grabbed his horse's reins, then paused. "Mister, are you going to be all right?" Ethan looked at Clara. She was already turning toward the barn, the evening light catching the revolver at her hip. Her face set in that particular stillness he was beginning to understand was her version of calm. "We'll see," he said. The boy rode. Ethan watched him go, and then Holt was there, coming around from the back, reading the situation on their faces. "The sheriff's paid off," Ethan told him. Holt's expression darkened. "Crawford's reach." 5 men after dark, Clara said. 2 directions. No backup from town. She looked at Holt. "How far out are your men?" "They were at the Powder River crossing at noon," he said. "If they rode hard—" "How far?" she said. Holt was quiet for a moment. 2 hours, maybe 3. The light was still in the sky, but the sun was moving. They had less than 2 hours of daylight left. Clara turned and looked at Ethan, and he understood, in the space of that look, the full weight of what he had stepped into when he opened his gate that morning. 5 armed men, a bought sheriff, No cavalry coming unless those two marshals made better time than expected. A dead woman's letter on his kitchen table. A leather packet that could bring down 6 levels of powerful men. And a woman named Clara Mercer standing in his yard, looking at him with those unreadable dark eyes. Except right now, for just a second, they weren't entirely unreadable. "You should have let me ride north," she said. "Probably," he said. "Are you afraid?" He thought about it honestly. "Not yet," he said. "Ask me again at sundown." Something flickered in her expression. Quick, barely there. It might have been the closest thing to a smile she had. She turned to Holt. "If we're doing this, I want to talk strategy. Now, not in 2 hours." "Agreed," Holt said. They went back inside. The leather packet sat in the center of the table, and Emily Whitaker's unsent letter lay beside it. And the evening pressed in against the windows, while the 3 of them planned for a night that none of them were certain they'd come out of the other side of. And Ethan Callahan, who had woken up that morning thinking about biscuits and a school teacher from Missouri, sat down and listened, and did not once consider walking away. He thought, briefly, of Emily, of the small loop on the Y. He thought, someone ought to answer for that. And then he turned back to the map Holt had spread across the table, and he started pointing out every soft spot on his land. The plan was simple, which was the only thing Ethan trusted about it. Holt would take the barn. Ethan would take the east side of the house. Clara would take the roof of the low storage shed beside the water trough. High angle, clear sightline to both the road and the south fence. If Dolan's men came in 2 directions the way Holt expected, they'd be walking into a triangle with no clean exit. "What if they come in 3 directions?" Ethan said. "Then we improvise," Holt said. "That's not a plan, that's a prayer." "Most good plans are both," Holt said, and he picked up his rifle and went to the barn. Clara climbed to the shed roof while the last of the daylight was still holding. Ethan watched her go up the side like someone who had done worse things in darker circumstances and thought nothing of it. She got to the top, checked her sightlines, reloaded her revolver, and looked down at him. "You need to stop watching me like you're worried," she said. "I'm not worried," he said. "You've got your worried face on." "I don't have a worried face." "Ethan." She looked at him directly. "I have been in worse situations than this and walked away from all of them." Emily Whitaker might argue that point, he said, and then immediately wished he hadn't. Clara went still. "That was unfair," he said. "I'm sorry." She was quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, "No, you're right." She turned back to her sightlines. "Get to your position." He went. The dark came down fast, the way it did in August, the light lasting longer than you expected and then dropping all at once. Ethan stood on the east side of the house with his rifle and listened to his own property the way he'd listened to it for 7 years. Except tonight, every familiar sound had a question inside it. The horses shifting in the barn, the grass moving, an owl somewhere to the north. An hour passed, maybe more. Then the owl stopped. Ethan's shoulders tightened. Owls didn't stop for nothing. He turned his head toward the north fence, and that was when he heard the shot. Not from the north, from the south. Sharp and flat and immediate. And then Clara's voice from the shed roof. "South fence, 2 men. Ethan, east side now." He spun. A rider was coming hard around the east corner of the barn, low in the saddle, and Ethan had less than a second. He pulled the rifle up, fired once, and the horse veered, and the rider went sideways into the dark and didn't come back up. From the barn, Holt's shotgun went off twice in rapid succession. Then it was loud everywhere all at once. Ethan moved along the wall of the house, keeping low, reloading as he went. He could hear someone running along the north fence, boots on dry ground, heavy and fast. He came around the corner and nearly ran directly into a man coming the other way, and they both pulled back at the same instant. And Ethan recognized the face in the dark only because it was the face he'd been looking at all afternoon. Dolan. They stood 6 feet apart. Neither of them had a clean shot. Too close, too much angle. Dolan had a revolver, Ethan had the rifle, and rifles weren't built for this distance against a man who could sidestep. "You should have let her go this morning," Dolan said. He wasn't breathing hard. That was the most unsettling thing. He wasn't breathing hard at all. "This didn't have to be your problem." "You made it my problem when you killed Emily Whitaker," Ethan said. Something in Dolan's expression shifted. "That was unfortunate. Wrong place, wrong road." "She had a name," Ethan said. "She had students. She had a life." "Everybody's got a life," Dolan said. "Right up until they don't." He was watching Ethan's rifle hand, waiting for the angle to shift. Ethan knew it and didn't move. And they stood there in the dark, measuring each other. And then another shot cracked from the shed roof, and someone behind Dolan went down hard. And Dolan flinched, just a fraction, just half a second. And Ethan closed the distance in one step and drove the stock of the rifle into Dolan's jaw. Dolan went down. He didn't stay down. He came back up fast, with blood in his mouth and fury in his eyes, and the revolver coming up. And Ethan grabbed the wrist, and the shot went wide into the night. And they went down together into the dirt, with a kind of ugly, desperate violence that had nothing cinematic about it. Just two men, fighting for the same piece of ground, and only one of them was going to keep it. Ethan was bigger. He hadn't known that mattered, until it did. He got Dolan's wrist pinned and the revolver loose, and then he had his forearm across the man's throat and his knee on his chest, and he pressed until Dolan stopped moving. He didn't kill him. He didn't know afterward exactly why, only that he found himself thinking, in the middle of all of it, about Emily Whitaker's letter, still sitting on his kitchen table. And something in him decided that the man who killed her ought to answer for it in a courtroom, with his name spoken out loud, not go quiet in the dirt of a Montana ranch and take everything he knew with him. Ethan tied Dolan's hands behind his back with his own belt, stood up, and looked at the yard. The gunfire had stopped. That either meant it was over, or it meant something had gone wrong enough that there was no one left to shoot. "Holt!" he called. "Here!" Holt's voice from the barn, rough but steady. "I've got 2 of them. One's down, one's cooperating. You?" "Dolan," Ethan said. "He's alive." A pause. Then, from the shed roof, "I have one on the south fence." Clara's voice, clear, controlled. "He dropped his weapon," Ethan counted. Dolan. 2 from Holt. 1 from Clara. 1 he'd put down on the east side. That was 5. He looked up at the shed roof. "You all right?" "Fine," she said. "Clara." "I said I'm fine." But she was coming down off the roof differently than she'd gone up. Slower. And when she dropped to the ground, she put her right hand against the shed wall and kept it there for a moment. "You're hit," Ethan said. "It's a graze." "How bad a graze?" "The kind you walk away from." She turned to face him, and in the dark he could see the darker stain along her left arm, high up near the shoulder, and she was holding the arm close to her body in a way that wasn't quite natural. "I've had worse," she said. "That's a remarkably low bar," he said. "Ethan," her voice dropped. "We got them all. It's done. Check on Holt." He looked at her for a moment longer than was strictly practical. Then he went. Holt had a cut above one eye, and a shoulder that he was rotating with the expression of a man cataloging damage and finding it acceptable. The 2 men he'd taken were alive, one with a broken wrist, one sitting with his back against the barn wall, looking like he understood exactly how badly things had gone for him. "Your men from the north," Ethan said. "They didn't come." "No," Holt said. He looked at the sky. "Which means either they hit trouble on the road or—" He stopped. "Or what?" Holt looked at him steadily. "Or Granger knew I was moving in and sent someone to intercept them." The word intercept sat in the air between them with all its implications. "Are they dead?" Ethan said. "I don't know." Holt said it plainly, without flinching from it. "I don't know." Clara had come up behind Ethan without him hearing her. "Granger wouldn't kill federal marshals," she said. "That crosses a line even he wouldn't cross. He'd detain them, delay them." She paused. "Which means he knows the raid failed, and he knows we have Dolan." "How fast will he know?" Ethan said. "The man who got away on the east side," Clara said. "You put him down, but did he get back up?" Ethan thought about it. The rider had gone sideways off the horse. He hadn't checked. He'd had Dolan coming at him from the other direction. "I don't know," he said. All 3 of them looked at the east fence line. "If he rode back to Granger tonight," Holt said slowly, "we have until morning before Granger makes his next move." "And his next move," Clara said, "won't be 5 riders." The way she said it was quiet and precise, and landed like a stone in still water. Ethan looked at her. "How many men does Granger have?" "On his payroll? 40-some. On his ranch right now?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but enough." Holt rubbed the back of his neck. The cut above his eye was dripping, and he was ignoring it with the practiced indifference of a man who had been ignoring his own injuries for 30 years. "We can't stay here," he said. "This property is known. We need to move those documents, and we need to move tonight." "Your horse and mine both rode hard," Clara said. "Ethan's horses are fresher." Both of them looked at Ethan. He went to the barn and saddled 2 horses without being asked. When he came back out, Clara had Dolan up on his feet and was looking at the man with an expression that was flat and focused and entirely without heat. Dolan's face had swollen along the jaw where Ethan had hit him. He was looking back at Clara with something that might have been calculation. The look of a man already trying to find the angle, even in a situation that had no angles left. "You think this finishes it," Dolan said to her. His voice came out thick around the swelling. "Granger's got connections you haven't touched yet. You get those documents to Washington, and half of them get buried." "Half," Clara said. "That's a start. You think this ends with justice." He said the word like it was a little contemptible. "It ends with you in a box. Granger doesn't lose." "Granger hasn't met a federal judge with this much evidence in front of him," she said. "He's about to." She turned away from Dolan and looked at Holt. "I need you to promise me something." "Depends what it is," Holt said. "Crawford, the governor's liaison. His name is in that packet 37 times. I need you to promise me his name is the first one called when this goes to trial. Not the last. First." Her voice didn't waver. "The men at the bottom of an operation like this are easy to sacrifice. The men at the top are the ones who make it possible. Crawford made it possible." Holt looked at her steadily. "I'll do what I can." "I didn't ask what you can do. I asked you to promise." A pause. "All right," Holt said. "Crawford first. I promise." She nodded once. Settled. Ethan brought the horses out and then stopped because something at the back of his mind had been trying to surface for the last few minutes, and it finally did. The boy. Ben Greer from the stables in Harlow Creek. "The kid who warned us," he said out loud. "If a rider went back to Granger tonight, and Granger starts asking around about who tipped us off." Clara's head came up. He's a stable boy in a town with a bought sheriff, Ethan said. If Granger's men start asking questions. He's 17 years old, Clara said, and she was already moving toward her horse. Clara, I'll be 20 minutes, she said. You're bleeding, he said. I know. She swung up into the saddle and looked down at him, and for a second he saw something in her face that was completely unguarded. Just a person. Just a woman. Tired and hurt and determined in the particular way that had nothing to do with toughness, and everything to do with not being able to live with herself if she didn't. He rode out alone in the dark to warn strangers, she said. Nobody's touching that kid. She rode before Ethan could say anything else. He stood there watching her go, and Holt came up beside him and said nothing for a moment. Then, she been like that the whole time? Since she got here, Ethan said. Holt was quiet for another beat. She told me once she did this for Emily. But I don't think that's the whole of it. No, Ethan said. I don't think so either. Holt looked at him sideways. You just met this woman this morning. I know. And you're standing here like a man who'd follow her into whatever comes next. Ethan considered denying it. He looked at the road she'd disappeared down and thought about the leather packet on his kitchen table and Emily Whitaker's letter, and the way Clara had said, someone ought to answer for this, without using any words at all. She came through my gate, Ethan said. That's enough reason. Holt made a sound that might have been a laugh and might have been something else, and went back to securing their prisoners. 23 minutes later, Clara came back with Ben Greer on a horse behind her. The kid looked pale and wide-eyed, and entirely unsure of how his life had led him to this particular point. Clara had a fresh bandage on her arm that she'd clearly done herself, fast and functional, nothing neat about it. His mother is in Harlow Creek, she said as she rode in. We can't leave him there tonight. Granger's men will go door to door when they realize what happened. Ethan looked at the kid. You do what you're told and you stay close, you hear me? Yes, sir, Ben said. Good. Ethan looked at Clara. You ready? She pulled the leather packet from inside her coat. She'd been carrying it against her body this whole time, he realized, through the fight, through the ride, every single moment, and looked at it for just a second. Then she tucked it back. I've been ready for 14 months, she said. They rode north into the dark, 5 of them, a federal marshal, a woman the law didn't have clean paper on, a rancher who'd woken up that morning thinking about biscuits, a 17-year-old stable boy who'd done the bravest thing of his young life, and 2 prisoners tied to their horses and wise enough, finally, to stay quiet. Behind them, Ethan's ranch sat empty for the first time in 7 years. The porch light was still burning the way he'd left it, and inside, on the kitchen table, Emily Whitaker's unsent letter lay beside an empty coffee cup, waiting. He didn't look back. He told himself it was because he was watching the road. He knew it was because if he looked back, he might lose his nerve, and he couldn't afford that right now. Not tonight. Not with the dark pressing in from every side, and Granger somewhere out there in it, already recalculating, already reaching for his next move. Whatever that move was, Ethan Callahan intended to be on the right side of it when it came. He rode. They rode for 2 hours before Holt called a stop. Not because the horses needed it, though they did, but because the marshal had been watching their back trail for the last 40 minutes, and something had changed in the way he sat his saddle. Tighter. More deliberate. When he finally raised his fist, everyone pulled up without a word, and the silence that followed was the particular kind that had weight in it. We're being followed, Holt said. Nobody asked if he was sure. The way he said it didn't leave room for that. How many? Clara said. 1, maybe 2, hanging back far enough that they don't want to be seen, Close enough that they don't want to lose us. He turned in his saddle and looked at the dark behind them. They picked us up about 3 miles back. Ethan thought about the man on the east fence, the rider he'd put down but hadn't confirmed. He got up, he said. Seems like, Holt said. So Granger knows we're moving, Clara said. It wasn't a question. She was already thinking past it, and Ethan watched her work through it the same way he'd watched her work through everything today. Fast, lateral, no wasted motion. He's not following us to stop us. He's following us to see where we're going. The relay station, Holt said grimly. If he finds out we're heading to the Powder River Relay, he'll have men there before sunrise. Then we don't go to the relay station, she said. Clara, that's the only... There's a trapper's cabin, Ethan said. Both of them looked at him. North Fork of the Stillwater, about 4 miles east of here. Old man named Seth Harker used it until 2 winters ago. It's been empty since. Nobody knows it's there except people who've hunted that ridge, and I've hunted that ridge every fall for 6 years. He looked at Holt. You could get a message out from there without using any road that a bought sheriff would know to watch. Holt studied him. You sure it's empty? I was up there in May, checking the elk sign. It's empty. And if we go there, Clara said slowly, working it through, whoever's following us follows us off the main road into unfamiliar territory in the dark. She paused. That's an advantage. Only if we know the ground better than they do, Holt said. Do you know that ridge? Clara asked Ethan directly. Well enough to walk it blind, he said. That was enough. They turned east. The man following them turned east too, and Holt confirmed it in a low voice after another mile. Still one rider, still hanging back, patient enough to be a professional, but not patient enough to be invisible to a federal marshal who'd spent 30 years reading back trails. Ben Greer had been silent for most of the ride, which Ethan appreciated. The kid was smart enough to understand that silence was the right contribution right now. He rode close behind Ethan with his eyes forward and his mouth shut, and only once, when a branch cracked loud to the west, did he make a sound. A sharp, involuntary intake of breath that he cut off almost immediately. Ethan glanced back at him. "You're doing fine," he said quietly. "I don't feel fine," Ben whispered. "That's how you know you're paying attention," Ethan said. They reached the fork in the trail that Ethan knew and the main group didn't, and he took them left along a shallow creek bed that muffled the horses' steps and cut their visible trail. 3 minutes later, Holt dropped back alongside him. "They stopped at the fork," Holt murmured. "Lost us." "For now," Clara said from his other side. "For now," Holt agreed. The cabin was where Ethan remembered it, low, solid, smelling of old wood and cold ash. It had 2 windows and 1 door, both of which Holt checked before he let anyone light the small lantern Ethan found on the shelf above the fireplace. Their prisoners went against the far wall, wrists secured to a ceiling beam with rope from the saddlebag. Dolan hadn't said anything since Clara had turned away from him back at the ranch. He sat with his eyes open in the dark, and the swollen jaw and the patience of a man who was still calculating odds. Holt spread the documents on the rough table and bent over them with a lantern. Clara stood at the window with her right hand resting on the revolver and her left arm held close, and Ethan brought her a strip of cloth from his saddlebag and held it out without saying anything. She looked at it, then at him. "You're still bleeding through that bandage," he said. She took the cloth. She tried to wrap it one-handed and couldn't quite manage the angle, and after about 5 seconds of watching her not ask for help, Ethan simply took it from her hands and did it himself. She went still and let him. "Tighter," she said. He made it tighter. She didn't flinch.
"How long have you been alone in this?" he said quietly, not making it a conversation Holt needed to be part of. "In this specifically? 6 months." Her eyes stayed on the window. "Generally, most of my adult life." "That's a long time to not trust anyone." "I trusted Pete Holloway," she said. "He ended up dead." Ethan tied off the bandage. He kept his voice low and even. "Trusting someone and losing them isn't the same thing as trusting being wrong." Clara was quiet for a moment. Outside, something moved in the trees. Probably an animal, probably nothing. And her hand went to her revolver, and then came back off it when the sound settled into ordinary night sounds. "You're very calm for a man who's been shot at twice today," she said. "I've been shot at before." "The war?" "Yes." She glanced at him sideways, just briefly. "Where?" "Chickamauga. Then again outside Atlanta." He paused. "I wasn't calm then." "What changed?" He thought about it honestly. "I decided the things worth protecting were worth the fear. Once you decide that, the fear gets quieter." He looked at her. "You already know that. You've known it for 14 months. Something in her face shifted. That barely there movement, that quarter-inch door. She looked back at the window. "Holt," she said, louder. "Tell me you have a way to get a message out before morning." Holt looked up from the documents. "I have a signal arrangement with my men. 3 fires on the high ridge, spaced wide. If they're in range, they'll see it and ride in." He paused. "If they're in range." "What do you need?" "Someone on that ridge for about 20 minutes with enough dry wood."
"I'll go," Ethan said. "No," Clara and Holt said it at the same time. Ethan looked at both of them. "You're the only one who knows this ground," Clara said. "If something goes wrong up there and you don't come back, we're blind." Holt goes. "My shoulder," Holt said. "Can you carry wood with it?" "Yes." "Then you go." She turned from the window. "I'll watch the trail. Ben watches our guests." She looked at the kid against the wall. Ben straightened up like someone had called his name in school. "Yes, ma'am." Holt took what he needed and slipped out. The cabin was quiet after that. Dolan's partner, the one who'd been cooperating since the barn, had his eyes closed, either sleeping or pretending to. Dolan himself had not looked away from Clara since they'd arrived. It was beginning to feel less like vigilance and more like something else, something colder. And after 10 minutes of it, Clara turned from the window and looked directly back at him. "Whatever you're thinking," she said, "it won't work." "Thinking about the documents," Dolan said. "No, you're not." A pause. "You know Granger will find this cabin." "Not tonight." "Before morning," Dolan said. "He has more men on this ridge than you think. The rider who followed you, he wasn't alone. He had someone with him riding quiet. I heard them split up before you stopped." Clara's expression didn't change, but her eyes flicked to the window. "You're lying," she said. "Am I?" Dolan tilted his head. His voice was conversational, almost gentle, and that was the worst thing about it. The gentleness. "I've been working for Victor Granger for 9 years. You know what I know about him? He doesn't send one man to watch something important. He sends one man you can see and one man you can't." He paused. "You spotted the one you could see." Ethan was at the door before he'd made a decision about it. He opened it a crack and listened to the dark and heard breathing that wasn't wind. He pulled back and looked at Clara. One look. She was already moving. "Ben," she said, very quietly, "get flat." The kid dropped without asking why. Clara went to the left side of the door. Ethan took the right. The 2 prisoners were against the wall, and Dolan's expression had changed. Not satisfied exactly, but settled, like a man who had just confirmed a calculation.
"How many?"
Clara breathed. "One's close," Ethan said against her ear. "Maybe 10 feet off the north wall."
"The other?"
He shook his head. Didn't know. She held up 3 fingers. He understood. 3, 2, 1. Ethan pulled the door open and stepped out hard and fast, and the man outside the north wall was not ready for it. He'd been positioned to watch the window, not the door, and Ethan had him by the collar before he could turn completely, and they went down together in the dirt. And this one was younger than Dolan and less practiced, and Ethan had him face down and still in about 8 seconds. Clara came out beside him and stood with her revolver up, covering the tree line to the north. 30 seconds of nothing. 40. She lowered it fractionally.
1,
she said. Dolan said 2, Ethan said.
Dolan wanted us to rush outside.
She was breathing controlled, even.
There's only 1. If there were 2, the second one would have moved when we came out.
From the ground under Ethan's knee, the young man said something muffled and pained. Ethan pulled him up by the collar and looked at his face. Young, maybe 20, frightened. "You work for Granger?" Ethan said.
"Yes, sir."
"How many more are out here?"
"Just me."
The kid swallowed hard.
"I was supposed to signal when I found you. I hadn't signaled yet."
Ethan looked at Clara. She was reading the boy's face with those steady dark eyes, and after a moment she gave a small nod. "He's telling the truth." "Where's your signal?" Ethan said.
"Pocket, left side."
Ethan reached in and found a small tin whistle. He looked at it, then at the boy. "How many blasts to tell Granger you found nothing and you're coming back?" The boy stared at him. "Son," Ethan said quietly, "you are 20 years old and you are scared, and none of what Victor Granger is paying you is worth what happens to you if this goes all the way. Now, how many blasts?" A long pause.
2,
the boy said. Ethan put the whistle to his lips and blew twice into the dark. 2 short, clean notes. They waited. From somewhere distant, far enough to confirm the boy had been telling the truth about being alone, a single answering whistle came back. Clara let out a long, controlled breath. They brought the second scout inside, and Holt returned 20 minutes later with ash on his hands and quiet satisfaction on his face. "Fires are up," he said. "If my men are within 12 miles, they'll ride." He looked at the second scout and then at Ethan. "You had trouble." "Nothing we couldn't manage," Ethan said. Holt sat down heavily. The shoulder was bothering him more than he was letting on. Ethan could see it in the set of his jaw. He poured water from the canteen and handed it to the marshal without comment, and Holt took it with a nod that had something real in it. For a while the cabin was quiet in the way that exhausted people go quiet. Not peaceful, but used up. Ben had fallen half asleep against the wall, with his chin on his chest and his eyes not quite closed. The prisoners were still. Clara stood at the window. Ethan found himself thinking about his ranch, the porch light burning, the north pasture where the grass came in thicker than anywhere else, Emily Whitaker's letter on the table. "Can I ask you something?" he said to Clara. She didn't turn from the window. "You can ask." "The letter she wrote, the one you brought." He kept his voice low. "You said she wrote back to my last letter. What did it say?" A silence. "I shouldn't have read it," Clara said. "I read it because I needed to know who she was, who had been on that road, who I had—" She stopped. "I don't know if I should tell you." "Tell me." Clara turned from the window and looked at him. Whatever she saw in his face must have settled something, because she took a breath. "She said she was nervous," Clara said quietly. "She said she'd read your letters so many times she felt like she knew you, but she was afraid that was presumptuous.
She said she hoped you weren't the kind of man who needed a woman to be quiet and small, because she'd never been able to manage either. A pause. She said she thought Montana sounded like the kind of place where a person could stop being afraid of being too much. Ethan looked at the floor. She sounded like someone worth knowing, Clara said. Her voice was careful, exact. Not soft exactly, but honest in a way that cost her something. She did, Ethan said. I'm sorry, Clara said. I know I keep saying that. I know it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't have to fix anything, he said. It just has to be true. She looked at him for a moment. It's true, she said. Before either of them could say anything else, Holt sat up straight. Riders, he said. Everyone came alert. Ben's head snapped up. Clara spun to the window. 4 riders coming from the north, moving at a purposeful trot. And then Holt made a sound, short, involuntary, almost a laugh, and said, That's Morrison's gray horse in front. That's my men. The relief in the cabin was physical, like air let back into a room. 2 federal marshals came through the door 2 minutes later, trail dirty and tired, and entirely professional. Deputy Morrison was 30, lean, with the eyes of someone who'd seen worse things than tonight, and organized his feelings about them later. The man behind him was older, quiet, and went straight to the prisoners without being asked, and checked every knot Ethan had tied with the approving expression of someone finding good work. You got the documents? Morrison said to Holt. Right here, Holt patted his coat. All of it? Nothing missing? Everything Clara Mercer spent 14 months putting together, Holt said. It's all there. Morrison looked at Clara. His expression was complicated. The look of a lawman encountering someone who'd done the right thing in the wrong ways and wasn't sure how to file that. Ma'am, he said. Marshal, she said. You've had quite a day. Yesterday was worse, she said. He almost smiled at that. Didn't quite. We ride at first light, Morrison said to Holt. Billings by tomorrow night. I've already wired ahead. There will be a judge waiting. Crawford, Clara said immediately. Morrison looked at her. Holt promised me Crawford's name goes first, she said. That's not negotiable. Morrison looked at Holt. Holt gave him a look back that clearly communicated something had been promised and he intended to keep it. Morrison turned back to Clara. Crawford first, he said. You have my word. Clara nodded. Something in her shoulders came down. Not all the way, not yet. But something. Ethan watched it happen and understood that this moment, this specific moment, Crawford's name promised in front of witnesses, was what 14 months of running had been aimed at. Not the documents, not the trial. This. The guarantee that the men at the top wouldn't slip out the back while the men at the bottom took everything. Holt looked at Ethan. Mr. Callahan, you and the boys should get some rest. We'll hold watch until dawn. Ethan looked at Clara. She was looking back at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. It had too many things in it at once. Exhaustion. Something careful. Something that was working itself out slowly, not ready to be spoken yet. You should sleep, he told her. I don't sleep well, she said. Neither do I, he said. But we both should try. He settled against the wall beside Ben, who was already properly asleep, and closed his eyes. He didn't expect to sleep. He thought about Emily Whitaker, about the letter on his kitchen table, about a woman who had never been afraid of being too much and had deserved so much more than a road outside Miles City. He thought about Clara standing at every window of every room they'd been in today, cataloging exits and sightlines, and never once stopping long enough to simply stand. He thought, she's been running so long, she doesn't know how to stop. He didn't know when he fell asleep.
He only knew that when he woke up, the dark outside had shifted towards something lighter, and Clara was still at the window, and she was holding Emily Whitaker's letter. She hadn't opened it. She was just holding it, the way a person holds something that belongs to someone else, carefully, with the full awareness of what it was. She didn't know he was watching. For a moment, with no one's eyes on her, she looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had been carrying an impossible weight for a very long time, and was finally, maybe, within sight of being able to put it down. Ethan didn't say anything. He let her have the moment, but he filed it away. That look, the way she stood in the dark with a dead woman's letter in her hands, and the first gray light of morning beginning at the edges of everything. He filed it away and held it, the way a man holds something he intends to come back to. Dawn was 20 minutes out. Billings was a day's ride. And Victor Granger was still out there, somewhere in the dark between here and Justice, with 40 men on his payroll and everything to lose. They rode out at first light with Dolan and the other prisoners tied to their saddles, and Morrison setting the pace. Steady, not rushed. The kind of pace that 8 miles without burning horses. Holt rode point. Clara rode beside Ethan without discussion, like it had been decided somewhere neither of them had spoken out loud. Ben Greer rode in the middle of the group, with the expression of a boy who had aged about 4 years in one night, and was still working out how he felt about it. For the first hour, nobody said much. The morning came in quiet and gold, and the land opened up the way Montana land does, wide and indifferent and beautiful in a way that didn't care whether you appreciated it or not. Ethan watched the ridge lines out of habit and said nothing. Clara spoke first. "When this is over," she said, not looking at him, eyes forward, "there will be a hearing. Holt will need my testimony. It could take months." "I know how federal hearings work," Ethan said. "I'm saying I won't be going anywhere for a while." She paused. "I don't have anywhere to go. My name is in those documents as a material witness. I'll be in Billings until the trial concludes." "All right," he said.
I'm not... She stopped, started again. "I'm not telling you that because I expect anything. I'm telling you because you deserve to know what you're connected to now. By association. Your name will come up."
"Clara," he said.
"What?"
"I know." He looked at her. "I decided that yesterday when I stepped onto that porch with a rifle. I knew what I was connecting myself to." She was quiet for a moment.
"Most men would call that a mistake."
"Most men weren't waiting at that gate," he said. She didn't answer, but something in her jaw shifted. Not quite a smile, but the muscle memory of one, like her face had forgotten how and was trying to remember. They rode another mile before Morrison raised his fist and everyone stopped. He was looking at the road ahead. About a quarter-mile out, where the trail bent around a low rise, 3 riders sat motionless, not moving toward them, just sitting, waiting. "Granger's men?" Ethan said. "Could be anyone," Morrison said, and his tone made clear he didn't believe that. Holt rode up beside him. They studied the riders in silence. Then Holt said, very quietly, "Middle one, that horse. You see the brand?" Morrison looked. "Double G." "Granger's personal stock," Holt said. "He only lets his top men ride those." Clara had come up on Ethan's left. Her voice was careful and flat. "The one on the right," she said. "That's not one of his hired men." "How can you tell from here?" Morrison said. "The way he sits," she said. "Straight, relaxed, like he owns the road." A pause. "That's Victor Granger." The name dropped into the group like a stone. Ethan looked at her. Her face had gone very still. Not afraid, but something older than afraid. The look of someone coming face to face with the thing they've been moving toward for 14 months and finding it smaller than expected and more dangerous for being small. He came himself, Holt said. He sounded almost surprised. He's desperate, Clara said. Desperate men make decisions they shouldn't. She looked at Holt. He knows if we reach Billings, it's finished. He's making one last play. 3 men, Morrison said. We have 6, including the prisoners. He didn't come with 3 men, Clara said. He came with 3 men you can see. Morrison looked at the ridge to the left, then to the right. His hand moved toward his rifle. How many? Ethan said to Clara. If I were him? She scanned both ridges with practiced eyes. 6 on the left ridge, 4 on the right, 3 on the road. She paused. 13 total. He's not here to negotiate. Holt looked at Morrison. Morrison looked back. Something passed between them. Experienced men running the same calculation and arriving at the same uncomfortable answer. We can't outrun them, Morrison said. No, Holt agreed. And we can't outgun 13 men on high ground with prisoners tied to half our horses. No, Holt said again. Ethan had been looking at the terrain while they talked. Not the ridges, the road behind them, and the creek bed they'd crossed about 10 minutes back, and the stand of cottonwoods to the northeast that ran along the creek all the way to... Holt, he said. That creek bed we crossed, where does it come out? Holt looked at him. North of the main road into Billings, Ethan said. About 2 miles past that rise. I hunted this country. If you follow the creek northeast, it comes out on federal land. Granger's men can't touch you on federal land without it being a direct act against the government. Morrison turned. You're sure of that route? I've walked it with a rifle and a pack mule in October dark, Ethan said. I'm sure. That still leaves Granger on the road between us and the creek, Clara said. Yes, Ethan said. It does. He looked at the 3 riders on the road, at the man sitting straight and relaxed in the middle like he owned everything in every direction. And then Ethan Callahan did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He handed his rifle to Morrison, straightened his hat, and nudged his horse forward. Ethan, Clara's voice was sharp. What are you doing? Buying you 10 minutes, he said. That's not a... Clara. He looked back at her. Just once. Steady and direct. Get them to that creek bed. Don't wait. I am not leaving you on this road, she said. Her voice had something in it he hadn't heard before. Something that cracked at the edge, just barely. You're not leaving me, he said. You're finishing what Emily Whitaker died for. He held her eyes. Go. He turned before she could answer and rode toward Victor Granger. Behind him, he heard Morrison say something low to Holt. Heard the group begin to move, not back the way they'd come, but angling northeast, off the road, quiet and fast. He didn't look back. He kept his eyes on Granger and rode at an even walk, hands visible, nothing aggressive in his posture. Granger watched him come. Up close, the man was older than Ethan expected. Mid-60s, silver-haired, the deep-lined face of someone who had spent his whole life outdoors, believing the outdoors belonged to him. He was well-dressed for a man sitting a horse at dawn on a dirt road. That detail bothered Ethan more than it should have. Mr. Callahan, Granger said. He said it pleasantly, like they were neighbors. You know my name, Ethan said. I know everything about you. You've been ranching the Stillwater Valley for 7 years. 160 acres, good grass, clean water. You served in the war. You've never been in legal trouble. Granger tilted his head. You're not the kind of man who should be in this situation. Yet here I am, Ethan said. Here you are. Granger looked past him at the empty road. His jaw tightened slightly.
"Where are they?" "Gone," Ethan said. "Gone where? Does it matter?"
Ethan kept his voice flat and reasonable, the same voice he'd used with Dolan on his porch the previous afternoon. "They're past where you can reach them. By the time your men on those ridges figure out which direction they went, they'll be on federal land." Granger stared at him. The pleasantness had gone out of his face. What was underneath it was colder and more honest. "You rode out here alone to tell me that." "I rode out here," Ethan said, "because I wanted to look at the man who killed Emily Whitaker." Silence. The two riders flanking Granger shifted slightly. Granger himself didn't move. Something in his expression recalibrated. Not guilt. He didn't think the man was capable of it. But something close to recognition. The recognition of a man who has always known there would be a reckoning, and has simply been postponing it. "I didn't give that order," Granger said. "Your men did it," Ethan said. "For your reasons. With your money." He looked at the man steadily. She was a schoolteacher from Springfield, Missouri. She was 31 years old. She had students who drew horses in the margins of their arithmetic pages. He paused. "She didn't know your name. She was on a road, and your men were on the same road, and she died for it. And you haven't thought about her once since it happened." Granger's jaw was tight. "This is a sentimental conversation for a man who met that woman after she was already dead." "I never met her," Ethan said. "That's the point." Something shifted in Granger's eyes. The calculation was still running behind them. Ethan could see it. The man was always calculating. But something else had appeared alongside it. Something uncomfortable. "You should ride away from this, Callahan. Whatever those documents say, powerful men have survived worse." "Maybe," Ethan said, "but not this time." Granger looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the road behind Ethan, at the ridges where his men were positioned, at the empty morning in every direction. "Arrest him," he said to the man on his left. The rider reached for Ethan's arm, and from the cottonwoods 30 feet to the east, a voice said, "Federal Marshal, don't move." Morrison stepped out of the trees with his rifle up. And then Holt appeared from the north side of the road. And then, and this was the part that Ethan hadn't expected, hadn't planned, hadn't asked for. Clara came from the south, revolver in hand, moving fast, her arm still bandaged, her face set in that absolute stillness. She hadn't gone to the creek bed. She had doubled back. "Clara," Ethan said. "I told you," she said, not looking at him, eyes on Granger. "I told you I wasn't leaving you on this road." Granger looked at the 3 weapons pointed at him, and at his 2 flanking riders who had both gone very still with the instincts of men who had survived this long by reading situations correctly. "Victor Granger," Holt said, coming forward with his badge out. "You are under arrest by authority of the United States Federal Marshal's Office on charges of cattle theft, conspiracy, procurement of fraudulent military contracts, and the deaths of 6 individuals whose names are in the documents currently on their way to Billings." He paused. "Get down from that horse." Granger didn't move for a long moment. He looked at Clara. "You burned 14 months of your life for this," he said, not angry, almost wondering. "You had nothing when you started. You were nobody. I could have buried you a dozen times." "You tried," she said. "Was it worth it?" She looked at him across the distance between them. The woman who had been running for 14 months and the man she had been running toward. And her voice came out quiet and certain and completely final. "Emily Whitaker," she said. "Pete Holloway. James Cutter. Ruth and Nathan Alcott. Deputy Frank Moore." She named them one by one. 6 names. Yes, it was worth it. Granger got down from his horse. The men on the ridges, seeing their employer taken, came down one by one with the slow, inevitable logic of men who were paid for loyalty and had just watched loyalty run out of road. Morrison handled the arrest with the efficient calm of a man who had been waiting for this moment long enough that he wasn't going to waste any of it on drama. He had Granger's hands bound and his horse secured and was already talking logistics with Holt in the clipped professional shorthand of men who had a long day of correct procedure ahead of them. Ethan stood in the road and looked at Clara. She looked back at him. "You didn't go to the creek bed," he said. "No," she said. "I told you to go." "You did," she agreed. "You could have been killed." "So could you," she said. "And you weren't asking for my permission when you rode up to 13 armed men alone." He looked at her. She looked back at him with those dark, steady eyes, and the bandaged arm, and the revolver now holstered, and something in her face that was not quite the same as it had been yesterday morning. Something that had come open, slightly, the way a window comes open after a long winter, when someone finally decides the cold is over. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You could have died for me." "I know," she said. "We met yesterday." "I know that, too." She held his gaze. "Does it matter?" He thought about that. About the letter on his kitchen table. About Emily Whitaker, who had hoped Montana was a place where a person could stop being afraid of being too much. About a woman named Clara Mercer, who had been running so long she didn't know what stopping looked like. "No," he said. "I don't reckon it does." Something in her face moved, real and unguarded and quick, gone almost before it arrived. But he saw it. They rode to Billings. It took the rest of the day, and by the time they arrived, the sun was coming down long and gold over the Yellowstone, and Morrison was already sending telegrams, and Holt was in a building with a judge, and Clara was sitting in a straight-backed chair in a federal office with documents spread across the table in front of her, going through every page with a precision that told Ethan she had been through them so many times she could recite them in her sleep. Ben Greer fell asleep on a bench in the hallway with his hat over his face and slept for 4 hours. Ethan sat beside him and watched the door and drank terrible coffee and thought about his north pasture and the porch light he'd left burning and Emily Whitaker's letter still on the kitchen table. When Clara came out of the office, it was past 9 at night. She looked tired in a way that was different from the tiredness of yesterday. Yesterday's tired had been the tired of a person still running. This was the tired of someone who had finally stopped. She sat down beside him on the bench. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "Crawford," he said. "Being detained as of 2 hours ago," she said. "Holt kept his promise." "And Granger?" "Federal holding. He'll be arraigned in the morning." She leaned her head back against the wall, closed her eyes briefly. "It's done," she said. The words came out small and almost wondering, like she was testing whether they were real. "It's actually done." "It's done," he said. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I don't know what to do now." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I have been doing this one thing for 14 months, she said. "Every decision I've made, every road I've taken or avoided, every name I've written down or conversation I've had, all of it pointed at this." She opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling. "And now it's done, and I'm sitting in a hallway in Billings, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do next." Ethan turned and looked at her profile. "You could rest," he said. "I'm not sure I know how." "You could learn." A pause. "Ethan," she said. "What?" She turned her head and looked at him directly. "I have a complicated background. I've done things that would make most men in this territory want nothing to do with me. I have enemies who are going to be very angry when those trials begin, and my name is going to be in every newspaper from here to Washington." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not an easy thing to be connected to." "You said that already," he said. "Yesterday, on my porch." "I'm saying it again. I heard you both times." He looked back at her. "Are you asking me something, Clara? Or are you warning me off?" A long pause. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I haven't had to decide that in a long time, which one I'm doing." "Well," he said, "when you figure it out, let me know." She almost laughed. He heard it, small and real and surprised out of her. Not the kind of sound a person performs, the kind that happens to them. Holt found them there 20 minutes later and told Clara she'd need to stay in Billings for the initial depositions. At least 2 weeks, probably 3. He told Ethan he was free to go home whenever he chose, that his cooperation would be noted officially, and he should have no trouble from any quarter going forward. "Thank you," Ethan said. Holt looked at him with the expression of a man who had seen a great many things over 30 years, and had learned to recognize the ones worth noting. "Mr. Callahan," he said, "you held your ground yesterday when you had every reason not to. Emily Whitaker would have been fortunate to know a man like you." Ethan nodded. He didn't trust his voice for a moment. Holt went back inside, and the hallway was quiet again. Just the two of them, and sleeping Ben, and the sound of a town going about its evening business outside. "Go home," Clara said. He looked at her. "Go home," she said again, and her voice was softer than he'd heard it. "Your ranch needs you. Your horses need you. Go home and—" She paused. "Fix whatever else needs fixing. The things you've been putting off." "There's a fence post on the south side," he said. "Fix that," she said, "and you'll be here, in Billings." "For a few weeks," she said. "Yes." "Billings is a day's ride," he said. She looked at him. He looked back. "It is," she said carefully. "A man could make that ride," he said. "Once a week, if he had reason." Something settled in her face. Something that had been held very tight for a very long time and was slowly, carefully, deciding it was safe to come undone. "He could," she said. He stood up and picked up his hat from the bench beside him. He held it in his hands for a moment and looked at her, at this woman who had come through his gate 24 hours ago, carrying a dead woman's name and a leather packet and 14 months of hard, lonely, necessary work. And he thought she looked like someone standing at the beginning of something she didn't have a name for yet. He thought he might be standing there too. "I'll be back in a week," he said. She nodded once. Not small. Real. He woke Ben Greer by tapping his boot, and the kid surfaced with a snort and looked around wildly until he remembered where he was. "We ridin' back?" Ben said. "In the morning," Ethan said. "Get a proper bed tonight." He walked out into the Billings evening and stood on the street and breathed the air that smelled like horses and cook fires and the Yellowstone somewhere to the south. And he thought about going home, about the porch light burning, about Emily Whitaker's letter on the kitchen table. He would read it when he got back. He'd been putting it off because he hadn't been ready. He thought he was ready now, not because it would hurt less, but because he understood better what it was for. Not an ending. A record, proof that Emily Whitaker had been real, had been hopeful, had been moving towards something. The least he could do was witness it. He'd plant something under that cottonwood tree, something that came back every year. He rode home the next morning with Ben Greer beside him, and the land was wide and gold and indifferent in the beautiful way it always was. And Ethan Callahan, who had stood at a gate with his hat in his hand and his heart doing something embarrassing in his chest, rode through it and felt, underneath the grief and the exhaustion and everything the last 2 days had been,
something he hadn't felt in a long time. Like the land ahead of him was open. Like the things worth protecting were still there, waiting. Like a week was not, when you thought about it honestly, a very long time at all. He rode. And back in Billings, in a straight-backed chair in a federal building with documents spread in front of her, and 3 weeks of testimony ahead, Clara Mercer, who had not slept well in 14 months, who had been running so long she'd forgotten what stopping felt like, put her hand flat on the leather packet that had cost her everything, and closed her eyes and breathed. Just breathed. For the first time in a long time, that was enough.